Famke Krumbmüller, who's an expert in European politics at Open Cities. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. There has been no activity for such a long time. Now, frantic last-minute negotiations. When you spoke to our producer, you talked about a nervousness, about a rush deal. What did you mean?
I mean, it's definitely a rush deal because obviously this has been going on for years. We could have had these discussions for years. But then at the same time, when we think back about other EU negotiations, this is typically how it happens. It always happens at 1 minute to midnight. Everybody needs a good doses of pressure. I remember Greece. The Greece deal, where it was up and down until the very last minute, and it seems like we've reached another one of these points in European Union history and policy making.
I'll come back to that point because it is relevant to a couple of things I wanted to ask you, but we'll see what is agreed or what is not agreed in the coming hours. But even if something is agreed in principle, do you think there is enough time to get the legal text and all of that sorted out by October the 31st, or are we heading now inevitably for some sort of technical extension?
It's extremely difficult to judge at this stage when you follow the news throughout the day. Whenever somebody important takes it to the media, he said something else. At this stage, I would think there may be a couple of hours less. Donald Tusk, President of the European Council, just said 7 to 8 more hours until there might be a deal. And then it would be extremely rushed to go through legal checks, whether the text is actually airtight, and then be able to be presented on the agenda of heads of states meeting tomorrow in Brussels for the European Council. An alternative would be to have an indicative vote in the House of Commons on Saturday, get an idea already whether a deal could go through on the UK side, and then hold another extraordinary European Council ahead of the 31st of October to get approval from all heads of state.
You mentioned
Alternatively to that, obviously, would be a technical extension, which would be difficult politically for Boris Johnson.
Yeah, it clearly would, and that's some of the domestic politics he is grappling with. You mentioned earlier about the last-minute nature of negotiations with the EU. Those who support Brexit have always said exactly that and repeated that at the last minute the EU would blink and make concessions. From what you have seen in the last 48 hours, is it the EU making concessions, or is it more the British making concessions about where an Irish border would be in terms of the Irish Sea?
At this stage, clearly both sides have made concessions. The EU, if what we're hearing now goes through as a deal, then the EU would have agreed to having two customs union essentially on the same island of Ireland. So have Northern Ireland in the UK customs union, and have the Republic of Ireland obviously in the EU customs union. And this presupposes that the UK has moved and agreed and essentially compromised on having a customs checks border running through the Irish Sea, and so running essentially through UK territory. At this stage, both sides have
a final quick thought. Is there nervousness and worry about the increasing signs of a very much more divergent approach going forward between the EU and the UK? And that is certainly getting a lot of attention suddenly in the last 12 hours or so.
Definitely, I would argue this is the main source of concern, certainly here in Paris, but also in the Netherlands, for example, and in Germany. The worry that not having the customs border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland at the border, but in the sea, making it not a very airtight border, let's say, and having a backdoor for unfair competition going through the single market. France is particularly worried about what we pay, about unfair competition from that perspective.
Do you know what, even in a 4-minute discussion, we highlight all of the problems they're having to solve by the end of these 7 to 8 hours. It gives you just an idea of the scale of what still lies ahead. Famke Krumbmüller, thank you very much for taking time to talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you.